Hi. Thanks so much for watching. I noticed on my last video, and I think on the video before, that there were several people who were asking me to continue doing tarot readings or what had happened to the tarot readings. And I do have a couple of videos on that, actually. Definitely go back and check out the video about why no tarot reading in Christianity, because tarot and Christianity are actually really directly opposed. That's something that took me a while I was studying to understand, but it's very important to understand. So I want to read you this passage in Acts 17, which is kind of about that, or helps us to understand why that might be. So today let's go to Acts 17, verse 16. So Acts is about the spread of the gospel after Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. The Gospels show us the life of Jesus. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then Acts comes directly after that. And it's basically the first century. It shows us how in the first century they fulfilled the charge in Matthew 28:18 through 20 to go and make disciples of all nations. That's a charge that we as disciples are still tasked with, but it's very faith building to see how in the first century they did this and what they went through in order to do it. So this is Paul in Greece. He's in Athens, which I know that I always learned Athens was like the seat of intelligence, the seat of learning. And so let's see what happens to Paul while he's there. So this is Acts 17, verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So just really quickly, just so we know, let's just go to the definition of what an idol is. So an idol, I think this is a Webster's dictionary. Yeah, Webster's dictionary. I have an old school dictionary. An idol is defined as an image of a god used as an object or instrument of worship, any object of ardent or excessive devotion or admiration, a false notion or idea that causes errors in thinking or reasoning, or anything that has no substance but can be seen as an image in a mirror. It also says an image or phantom and apparition, which I think is really interesting considering some of our earlier discussion about angels and demons, but that might be too much to get into right now. So anyway, so let's just keep in mind that an idol is an object or instrument of worship. So Paul sees that the city is full of idols, so people are worshiping all over the city, but they're worshiping idols, which means that they are worshiping things that are made by men, basically, like, things that you can see and touch and hold and that you can make, and that by your own skill or by somebody else's skill that has been made very beautiful, very appealing, but that's what they're worshiping. I think for us, we can kind of compare it to you see people with like saints necklaces, but if that's like, that could be like an idol, or for us, like tarot cards, with the meaning on there, or, what else would be an idol? I think that, thinking about your sign, whatever, that can be an idol. That was a big idol in my life. Astrology was a big idol in my life before. Thinking about, well, I was born on this day at this time, and that means this, and the other. Okay, so there's lots of idols that are available to us, whether they're tangible or intangible. They can be an idol can be an idea, or it can be something that you actually hold in your hand, right? Okay, so verse 17. So he, Paul, reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. So this is awesome because it shows that Paul is distressed because he sees that the city's full of idols, and how he deals with this is by reasoning with people day after day. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. So these are people who are at two ends of the spectrum. Epicureans are ones, we've probably heard the word Epicurean, where it means that you're like a gourmand. You're somebody who samples a little bit of everything, and you want to be into everything. You want to try some of everything. And then there's Stoics, and the Stoics are the ones who don't believe in excessive emotion, who don't believe in excess in anything. So there's the very excessive people and the very ascetic people, the people who don't, who believe in just keeping to yourself. So a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." So he's talking about some gods that they don't know about. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So we have to remember that in Paul's time also, that this didn't happen that long ago. So there were people who witnessed the resurrection, who witnessed Jesus' death and resurrection. So this is not ancient history at this point. So that's just good to know that these are coming from Paul was not an eyewitness to Jesus' death and resurrection, but he knew people who were. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." So they're open to kind of hearing about what Paul has to say. And then in verse 21, it says, "All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas." So I love this little side note. The Bible is full of these little side notes that are actually very relevant. But so he's saying, so it's also just true. It's like, we think about Athens, it's a center of learning, center of discussion. So this is what they did all the time. So for me, I've been in 2 environments in my life where this is the case. I was in graduate school in English where this is what everybody did. We spent all of our time just talking about and listening to the latest ideas. And then also, in this world, in the spiritual world, the world of seeking, we spend a lot of time listening to and talking about new ideas and what's this person's reading, or what is, a tea leaf reading, or whatever, so we're kind of open to all these things, but we may not know what we're actually worshiping or what we're actually looking for. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you." So I have a little note in my Bible from the first time I read this where I was like, "Oh, to an unknown God, that's like how we talk about the universe, I feel like that's kind of, in our modern times, that's our version of Athens. I feel like culturally we are at an Athenian place where we're interested in new ideas, we're interested in some way of worship. We all feel the need for something, but we may not know what it is that we're actually really seeking. So I feel like there is a lot of religiosity, or people, we can be very religious, but we can be very religious about something that we don't actually understand very well. We can be worshiping an unknown God when we're worshiping sort of idols or things that are not God. So what Paul has to say about this is in verse 24, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else." So I think this is really powerful. I know for me, before I studied the Bible and became a Christian, I definitely was religious in my life about a lot of things. I had a lot of rituals, a lot of just ways that I believed things should be done. And some of them were just in terms of propriety or how people should talk to one another or whatever. But, and some of them were well, I arranged this in this way, because that's pleasing. But I did a lot of things that were pleasing to me, but not necessarily pleasing to God. And I definitely was someone who believed in the universe. To me, there was no way to deny that there was a God, there was definitely a power that arranged things that was beyond me. But what I didn't realize was that my way of relating to that power, to the universe or whatever, was actually idolatry, because in a way it gave me control. Rather than acknowledging that God was in control of everything, I was well, if I can just read this, if I can read the signs, if I can figure out what it means that I'm a Capricorn and blah, 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 and that he's a whatever and that she's a whatever, then I can put it all together in this way that makes sense, Like that's what I really wanted, is just to really grasp everything, to really understand, and basically in a way to play God, to be the one who understands, to be the one who knows, to be the one who sees what's right for everybody, and that's not a power that I actually have, it's not a power that we as humans are called to have. We are called to be God's children and not to usurp his place, basically. So I think that when we don't understand that God is actually in control of everything, it's easy for us to get very anxious and to feel like we have to control something, or we have to find a way to make things work for us, And I think that for me, that's not something that I would have said, oh, I'm trying to be in control. In fact, I felt like I was giving up control because I was, something was like, I was just passing on messages and stuff. But there is this way in which I was really trying to control the universe by trying to kind of look up God's skirt in a way, It'd be like, okay, like I'm going to grab this knowledge, like I'm going to, like figure it out, it's mine to figure out, right? And that is, just not the case. So yeah, I would, oh yeah, okay, so I wanted to read in verse 26, after it says, rather he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. Oh, I was thinking too that yesterday I was thinking about this, and I think this is kind of a trap that creative people tend to fall into, because we tend to be open, we tend to be emotional people, and also like once like you feel this power from creating something and it's very satisfying, but you can start to get a little lost with like with the limits of your own power, So I feel like for me in my life before I studied the Bible, there were a lot of ways in which I tried to make things okay, or I tried to make things the way that I wanted them to be. And I felt like I had control over more than I actually did. So I was thinking that it's sort of like it's sort of like being a little kid and first realizing that like you live not just in a house on a block, but also in a country, and like also in like, on a continent, and also on a planet, which is also just like floating in space, like with nothing holding it up, right? Like, and then you realize all this and you're like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to keep this all going, And so you like get up in the middle of the night and like spin circles 3 times clockwise and 3 times counterclockwise in order to just make sure that the world keeps turning, I feel like that's not something I did, but I feel like that was my mindset before I studied the Bible, and it's something that God still has to discipline out of me. Is this way of like trying to control things that I just couldn't possibly control, and that God is totally on top of. That God has got, God has the power to suspend our like beautiful, wonderful, mysterious earth over nothingness, and the book of Job talks about that also, but to suspend it over nothingness, whereas we don't, So what's really important is for us to not get so caught up in an illusion of power, which is what idols give us. They give us the illusion that, if we pay 25 cents every day to our statue of Mars over here, then Mars is going to bring us the victory, or if we, if we make sure that we really carefully evaluate every astrological aspect before we get into a relationship, then that's definitely going to make the relationship work out, or if we get a reading and the reading says this, that, and the other, then that's definitely going to, make things work the way that we want them to work. And we all have had readings or whatever, and we know that it doesn't work that way, not that they're whatever. I'm not going to get all into that because I have a lot to say about that. But that's just not. But like worshiping pieces of God will never actually satisfy us. We have to worship God himself. And the only way to understand what is pleasing in God's eyes is to seek after him. And the way to seek after him is to read his word, which is the Bible. So there's no shortcut. There's no way around it. There's no way to just be spiritual and find God on your own outside of the Bible. You have to go to the Bible. So I'm going to read the rest of this passage, which is starting in verse 26. So we're in Acts 17, verse 26. It says, "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring." So, and then it does continue. "Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead." So it tells you basically what will happen if you don't repent. But what will happen if you do is much better. You will be saved, and you will get to actually have a relationship with God. So that's like the best thing in the world. It's really, that's like what you want. That's why you do it. To have a relationship with God is like incredible. So we already know how incredible it is to just live and move and have our being in God. That's like that's like basically a description of what we think of as the universe, where we're like, wow, there's all these synchronicities, there's all this beauty, it's crazy how this happened and all this stuff. But how much more to actually have a relationship with God, to not just exist in him, which we all do, like just by virtue of being born, we exist in God because it's his world and he made it. So we all live off of God's bounty, basically. But how much better to actually have a relationship with him and actually be accept that you are his child, and be cared for by God. So the other quick point, this is getting long, so I want to wrap up, but the other quick point I want to make is, so it does say, "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us." So a couple of things here. I really appreciate that this is a scripture that's very broad and very personal. So it does say that God made all the nations and marked out their appointed times in history. So that means that, like, from the beginning of time, God decided where the countries would be and when they would rise and when they would fall and all this stuff. But it also means, like, personally in our lives, that he's decided the path of our life since the very beginning. And he's set up where we live, he's set up where we work, he's set up who we went to kindergarten with, who we went to high school with, and who we're going to meet next week, And in order, it says that he did this for the express purpose so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. So though, this is God's world, we exist within it, and in him we live and move and have our being, there is an action that's required from us in order to have a relationship with him. It says, so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. So there is a perhaps here. We have to reach out for him and find him, even though he's kind of set everything up for us in order so that we can do that. So this is kind of like, the grand gesture scene in like a romantic movie, where it's like, okay, like, he's planned everything out in order to have this relationship with us. So it's basically like, he's the guy standing there in the stadium with the cheerleaders doing backflips behind him or whatever, with the big placard that says, say yes, and then, but you, as the person who's being courted, you still have the option to say yes or say no, So it is up to you. Everyone has their own decision, but God's desire is to be with you. And God has set it up so that he can be with you and so that you can be with him. But you have to say yes, and you say yes by seeking him, and you seek him through his word. So, I'm going to leave you with that today. I would just encourage you to do that. If you don't feel like you're seeking God right now, I would encourage you to seek God through his word. yeah, feel free to get in touch. My email address is Samira, SAMIRA .Franklin, FRANKLIN @gmail.com. You can get in touch anytime. Okay, thanks so much. Bye.